Thank you for listening and supporting the Daily Memphian. Sign up for one of our many free newsletters and breaking news alerts at dailymemphian.com/email to receive the latest local news stories impacting our community. Our weekly newsletters cover everything from sports to arts and culture, business, food, and more, along with daily updates of all the news we publish each day. Sign up or manage your email preferences at dailymemphian.com/email.
Introducing St. Jude Flashpoint.
We don't get to choose what happens to us, but we do get to choose how we let it affect us.
Rate, review, and subscribe to St. Jude Flashpoint.
This is the Daily Memphian Politics Podcast. I'm Bill Dries. Our main event is Memphis City Council member Chase Carlisle on vaccine problems, who gets council grants, and the 100 North Main building. Top of the podcast, much has happened since our last meeting, much of it at and to the Shelby County Health Department. In the space of about 4 remarkable hours on February 26th, the state's health commissioner outlined the most serious allegations yet in the county's handling of the vaccine program locally, namely that the leaders knew about 2,400 doses of the vaccine that had been wasted, went bad across 7 incidents, and didn't tell the state until Commissioner Dr. Lisa Piercy said she was contacting the FBI. The other allegations by the state include the possibility that someone may have stolen vaccine from one site and that there was very little, if any, documentation, record keeping, or ability to know the inventory of vaccine. After the Nashville press conference, Governor Bill Lee was on the ground here at the fairgrounds, and he called the state's decision to take vaccine handling out of the hands of the local health department and the county administration was what he termed a severe intervention, and quoting again, a real lack of leadership. The county commission met in special session still later in this 4-hour period, and County Mayor Lee Harris announced there that Elisa Haushalter is resigning as health department director effective the end of this month, with an interim director expected to be named possibly this week. And after a wind down of vaccine duties, Harris said the county will be rebuilding the health department. Harris was both defended and heavily criticized, mostly along the commission's partisan divide after the announcement. The winter storms that covered us in snow kept us below freezing for a whole week and wreaked havoc with our water pressure, had another effect, it turns out. Not so much for what happened here, but what happened elsewhere, namely in Texas, where the results for the ERCOT utility were much more severe, in loss of power and then spikes in utility bills. ERCOT is a power consortium similar to MISO, Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, the most mentioned contender to replace the Tennessee Valley Authority as the supplier of electric power to Memphis Light, Gas, and Water Division. Those on both sides of this issue will have problems with that statement and general description and have detailed and nuanced explanations for why they believe that is either not a fair comparison or isn't enough of a comparison. And it turns out we may have time to mull that over, because Memphis Light, Gas, and Water is considering suspending its 2-year examination of breaking with TVA. The utility's president and CEO, J.T. Young, told his board that is his recommendation for a process that has really been stalled since last fall. That's when the city council voted down a contract to take a next step in the formal process, a request for proposal process with binding proposals on every step of what it would take to replace TVA with another supplier, from rates for electric power to transmission systems to power generation by MLGW, everything in short. Young said the crisis in Texas demonstrates that electric power should not be seen exclusively as a commodity bought in market conditions and market rates, but as a necessity that should not see price spikes from its commoditization. He says now is not the right time to take quotes, especially on rates, because on paper, there probably will be savings, even in such a volatile environment. But that may not mean much in an emergency like the one in Texas. In short, it looks like Texas in particular is raising serious questions about power consortiums that manage a market of power wholesalers and the utilities that are their customers. So he recommended that MLGW instead focus on its $1 billion 5-year infrastructure upgrades for its gas, water, and electric divisions and finishing them ahead of the goal of the end of 2023, and start talking terms with TVA about re-upping. The MLGW board took no vote, and Young did not seek a vote at the March 3rd board meeting. Memphis City Council member J.B. Smiley Jr. with a novel approach to the bill in the Tennessee legislature by Republican State Senator Brian Kelsey of Germantown to drop all residency requirements for police and firefighters across the state. Smiley wants Kelsey to exempt Memphis from that and allow the city to keep its current requirement that all city employees, including police and firefighters, must live in Shelby County. His reasoning is if there is no residency requirement, the city then has to double down on background checks with more out-of-county applicants in the pool, including social media searches for signs of affiliation with racist organizations or posts that indicate that person may not be the best prospect to give a gun and a badge. But he argues the city can't do that because of the 1978 federal consent decree that bars Memphis police from conducting political surveillance, and a 2018 court ruling that held the decree applies to looking at Facebook posts. The decree and later ruling by Judge John McCullough, however, applied to political surveillance by police, and McCullough specifically ruled as violations police setting up an account on Facebook where they posed as a protester, as well as noting book recommendations and even food truck rodeo gatherings in intelligence reports. Joining us now is Memphis City Council member Chase Carlisle, about a year and 2 months into a 4-year term of office on the council. Councilman, we are recording this the week of a very busy, if virtual, council session. Let's start with the Shelby County Health Department's problems in vaccine distribution. You called for Director Elisa Haushalter to resign, drafted a resolution to that effect. By the time this got to the council this past Tuesday, she had turned in her resignation notice, and the resolution in its original wording wanted the health department to be nowhere near anything to do with vaccine distribution until state and federal investigations are concluded. What is it that you want from those investigations?
Bill, first off, thanks for having me today. It was a very busy week. It's interesting to hear you say a year and 2 months. It feels like a lifetime at this point. But I've certainly enjoyed the time and the work. Look, calling for Elisa Haushalter's resignation gave me no pleasure. Nobody wanted to be in this position. I think we all, as Memphians and Shelby Countyans, would have preferred that everything go off without a hitch and be smooth operating and understanding that mistakes will get made. And so, I'm to a point now, I think like the rest of the city, that we want to move forward. But what we would like to know and ensure is that a very thorough investigation occurs so that we can understand exactly what happened in an effort to not repeat those mistakes again. And if anything of a nefarious or criminal nature did take place, that those individuals be held accountable. I think that's the least that we could ask.
Mm-hmm. You think this is about more than the health department, that there is fault beyond those bureaucratic boundaries?
I don't know that. To the nature of the investigation, I'll say that's why I think an investigation is warranted, and that that it be expedited, and that the public be afforded the opportunity to see the report, and that we understand and trust in the process, that it be transparent, and that the public has a high level of trust that when that report comes out, that it is thorough and valid. I will say that while the language in my resolution may have been harsh, ultimately the health department was granted the authority by by Governor Lee to exercise its rights in several areas throughout the year, throughout the COVID pandemic. But certainly there's always the boss at the top in the administration, and we'll see what the report tells us.
And we've also had to some degree kind of conflicting interpretations of how this all works. As you know, Mayor Strickland has been fairly adamant that the health department still does have a role in terms of setting pandemic directives and things like that. But when Governor Lee came here last Friday, he kind of stripped away a lot of the subtlety of the language that others were using and said this was what he termed a severe intervention, and that he thought there was a lack of leadership in all of this. So Tennessee Health Commissioner Lisa Piercy is in the city on March 12th. I think that's still kind of a tentative thing. I take it that you want to be among those who talk to her to find out what's going on from the state end, and what you want to say at the same time what you think the city needs from the state in this, correct?
What I want outside of to understand what occurred with the health department within the Shelby County government's purview over the health department is to ensure that Memphians and the Shelby County municipalities and unincorporated Shelby County, our citizens, are getting vaccines as soon as we possibly can get them to them in a very logistical, expedited, easy to operate in manner. That's what I'm focused on.
As the council meeting was underway this past Tuesday, County Commissioner Tammy Sawyer said this criticism is political, and it's you and several other council members getting ready to challenge Lee Harris if he seeks a second term in the 2022 county elections. So your reaction, but first of all, are you running for county mayor next year?
All I'm interested in doing is the job that's and the task that's in front of me. I haven't given it any thought. Again, I think when it comes to having to be out in front and in the public, last week calling for Dr. Haushalter's resignation was out of exasperation that no one else had, because I think a lot of Memphians would tell you I was saying what a lot of them were thinking, and they were looking for someone that was elected to stand up and say, we hear you. We're just as concerned as you are. I'm not going to get in a war of words with somebody. They are entitled to their opinion. But I think that my record in supporting COVID-19 relief and supporting Memphians, there's not a single vote that I wouldn't stand behind that or comment that I've made from the dais. Period. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But before your time on the council, there was a time when the city provided some partial funding to the Shelby County Health Department. Should the city restore some measure of responsibility and or funding for that health department as maybe one of the lessons learned from this whole pandemic experience?
It's certainly an interesting question. I think this ultimately goes back to the idea of who is in charge. In times of crises in our structure of government, and multiple times throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, people don't know whether to go to the city government, the county government, the health department, which mayor has the authority. And it creates a lot of chaos, confusion, and within that, people get scared. So sometimes I think this, and I brought it up before, the duplicative government structure that we have here based on the size of our municipalities and the size of Memphis creates a lot of chaos. And so it's something I think we have to consider when we talk about a conversation in consolidation. I think it's presented itself as very problematic here.
Mm-hmm. Realistically, it's been a short amount of time since we had the last referendum in the city and the county outside of the city on consolidation. What do you think is a realistic timetable for reconsidering consolidation of city and county government?
You know, I don't have a timetable other than to say that when I ran for city council, consolidation wasn't even on my mind. And it wasn't until we got into the pandemic that I realized how much confusion and chaos And just as a businessman said, if I were running this company with looking at two separate holding companies and having all this overlap, it just doesn't make sense to me. How can we make it better? And ultimately, really, when I say, and the other reason I say there's not a timetable, I think what I really want to try and do is figure out and explore ways in which we can grow the economy, we can grow jobs for Memphians and for the people of Shelby County, for this region. And when I think about that, one of the options is consolidation. And so I guess the reason I'm not saying that there's a timetable is we have to explore all of those ways in which we think we can grow our economy and get our fair share from the state government. And consolidation is one option. If other people have other options, I'm happy to sit down and want to listen and learn to that.
Mm-hmm. All right. At the top of the podcast, we recap the recommendation from Memphis Light, Gas, and Water President and CEO J.T. Young to suspend the process of reviewing what it would take for the utility to leave the Tennessee Valley Authority. As you know, for the last 2 years, this has been one of the prime political and government structural topics at play in our civic atmosphere here in Memphis. What do you think about his recommendation to say that, look, there are some questions that have been raised with what happened in Texas with the utilities down there, and so things are way too volatile, and we need to just put this on the shelf for now?
Well, I did read articles in our local papers, the Daily Memphian included. I was not present at the board meeting when he made his announcement, nor did I see his press conference. But the general gist, I believe, is talking about indefinitely suspending the review of what it would look like to depart from TVA. And I'll say this: J.T. Young was hired and appointed by the mayor of Memphis as an expert in the utility industry. And I certainly, and as well as MLGW is overseen by Board of Commissioners. And then the city council has its role because we believe, MLGW is a division of the city and it's owned by the city of Memphis ratepayers. And so I think we have to respect and reflect what JT is saying, but ultimately it was the council that suspended the review of whether we would leave or not. If you remember, they brought forth a proposal to explore or have a firm explore and price out what it would look like in totality, all risk associated with and cost associated with seeking whatever savings would be left over. And it was members of the city council that stalled that effort. And so here we are in the fourth day of March. And so I hear what JT is saying. I'll be interested to see what my colleagues have to say when we get back together in the next council meeting. But if we had approved that GDS contract to explore those options, we would be a mere 45 to 60 days away from having that information. So I think it's not really JT to blame if you wanted to explore the process. It's the council members who voted against the GDS contract who suspended the process in the first place.
And we should say that should Memphis Light, Gas, and Water re-up in effect with the Tennessee Valley Authority, that would also be something that, according to what was said in the board meeting this past week at Light, Gas, and Water, that would be something that would probably go to the council as well.
Sure. I would think any significant, our charter mandates that any contract with a value over $50,000 and any employment agreement worth salaried over $90,000 come to the council for approval. I think it's important that people understand that there's right now the city of Memphis or MLGW rather, Memphis Light, Gas, and Water for its energy supply is in a 5-year rolling agreement with Tennessee Valley Authority. What is on the table is a 20-year agreement that has some what I'll call credits for the long-term engagement, which obviously is time value of money. What I believe MLGW is looking at now is trying to amend or renegotiate the 5-year rolling agreement. As someone who's negotiated a lot of deals, what I will tell you is even if we had gone down the path of looking at leaving TVA We probably would have been in a much stronger negotiating position with TVA had we had a alternative power supply portfolio fully vetted and on the table as an option. When someone thinks you're going to leave or you have another option, you have a much stronger bargaining chip. And so now, again, we don't have that on the table, so we won't be negotiating in a stronger position, in as strong of a position as we would have been.
Mm-hmm. Two other topics. Let's talk about the city's tallest building, the 100 North Main building, vacant and deteriorating for 7 years and counting, just a few blocks from the Renaissance Convention Center that's coming out of a $200 million renovation by the city. You voted with the majority for the city through the Downtown Memphis Commission to buy 100 North Main and the rest of the block with $12 million from a pilot extension fund. Tell me why this is a good idea if private developers couldn't find a way to get this project going.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Look, I as a taxpayer have always gone back and forth about whether I believe the city of Memphis or any government entity should be involved in and to what degree in a potential private development. However, in this instance, I've also been on the private side where I've seen buildings in Memphis that are in key locations sit vacant and continue to deteriorate over an extended period of time, and the drag and the negative impact it can have in creating a vibrant downtown, which is one of the key pieces of our economy, is tourism. And so when you've got a super block on Main Street that may sit vacant for another 20 years, it's going to look just like the Hotel Chiska did before we redeveloped it. You had the Orpheum and Beale Street and a lot of work going on South Main, but you have this connection piece where at nighttime it's dark and desolate and scary and rife for the potential for crime. And so in order to activate that street and connect our $200 million development and continue to create a more vibrant downtown, I think the city had a unique opportunity to step in and buy that asset and figure out how to position it for private development. And something of that size and scale and location could be a $200, $300, $400 million private development. And so the city had a chance to take control of that. Sure, the current owners could have sold it to another private developer, but we wouldn't have known if that private developer had sat on it for years. The Steric building is a prime example. It's been in the same family for 20, 30, 40 years. I don't think it's been occupied since the 80s. And that's created a significant problem for us. We've got these marquee, iconic buildings that are just wasting away. So that's why I chose to vote in favor of it. I think we're positioned right now in the economic cycle with low interest rates and people looking to develop property and with the momentum that's downtown to see an iconic development at that site.
Mm-hmm. This same pilot extension fund is also being used to finance the $62 million set of 5 parking garage projects downtown, as well as a parking garage in the Snuff District. Can this fund produce enough revenue for all of this put together? You know,
from my review, let me say it this way. I think that question is best suited for the chief financial officer of the DMC. From what information has been presented to me, it seems like that fund can support the projects on the table. If not, I would be very concerned with the information the DMC has supplied to us. Mm-hmm. But based on what I've seen and the way that we're structured, I have to trust that the information provided by the professionals that we've put in those roles is sound, and their judgment and advice is sound.
The city has not ruled out possibly demolishing this 37-story part of the city skyline. From your background and your work in commercial real estate, how likely do you think that it might come to demolishing 100 North Main?
Well, it's a great question. And I'll say, because of my background, every building like this is unique and different and has its own set of challenges. Certainly, it's always really great to see buildings rehabilitated. I think this one will certainly have some very healthy debate on whether to take it down or whether to save it. As we get into it from the city side, I look forward to it. But certainly what I'd like to see at the end of the day is somebody that will come forward, whether it utilizes saving the building or taking the building down, with something that's going to contribute in a significant way not only to the vibrancy and fabric of downtown, but has an economic impact that continues to drive the city forward.
All right. With a few minutes remaining to us, let's get into the council community grants program. That's a line item that in normal times was at about $2.6 million. There's a resolution pending before the council to take it back up to that level after some pandemic cuts in the current fiscal year. And this comes out to about $200,000 per council member. Walk me through your amendments on who you think should and should not be able to get these grants and why you think it's important to add that.
Sure. I think first thing, and I'll try and be quick here, is that we have a very finite set of dollars in our budget. It's a very tight budget and something that's had a lot of discussion over the last 9 to 12 months about what the priorities of the administration and the council are. And one of the things that I'll say for me is that I recognize the importance of nonprofits and the work they do in our city in providing wraparound services or specialty services that the city is maybe not the most competent in. And it's important to have partnerships. But I also recognize that we have things that we've had significant amounts of conversation around, like transportation, that has factual data that says an increased investment in transportation can have an increase in economic viability for a city. And so for me, I prefer to see some of this money, if not all of this money, go to transportation in the form of funding MATA in an ongoing way. My colleagues have disagreed. And so we have this program in which, to your point, the council members donate money out or grant money rather. And so to Councilman Jones's credit, over the years, he and Councilman Ford Jr., when he was on the council, and Councilman Jones have continued to create and refine the program, eligibility requirements, grant writing applications. And so I brought an amendment forward that basically said, look, if you are a city council member that has a family member, and our charter defines what that is through the 6th degree, through marriage or blood, that serves in an organization and in a board of director, officer, manager, or an employee, you can't grant money to that individual. I think, and then I went on further to say, look, any nonprofit or affiliate of a nonprofit that's contributed to your PAC or to your campaign, you can't give money to. And that's just good government. I don't think our taxpayers want their taxpayer-funded dollars to be granted by an individual who may receive a benefit from an organization in which they give money to.
Mm-hmm. And so does your amendment, and there was some question about this because you said no campaign contributions from nonprofits, and Alan Wade, who's the council attorney, said that's not going to happen because it would endanger or have their tax exempt status revoked. So does that extend in your amendment to people who might contribute personally who are on the boards of those organizations?
That's a great question. And I did. I stopped short of saying officers or directors or board members of organizations that had contributed to campaigns because, again, Memphis is a small town, and I don't know that we could get any money out to any nonprofit in the city if that were the reach. It was mainly because organizations will use this money for salaries or programming that may benefit somebody. So I did stop it short of that.
All right. More discussion on that amendment and the other matters we've talked about here to come, and probably many more matters after that. Our guest has been Memphis City Council member Chase Carlisle. This week on WKNO's Behind the Headlines, Memphis tourism head Kevin Kane and Denny Riley of the Majestic Grill on the businesses of tourism and food and their recovery. You can hear the podcast of that show on our website now. Subscribe to the Daily Memphian at dailymemphian.com. You can subscribe to this podcast and our others at Google Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. I'm Bill Dries. The Daily Memphian Politics Podcast is produced by Kix Patterson.
In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.